Welcome to everyone joining for this afternoon's webinar. Will patrons still travel for events with Kevin and Frederic from Stay22. We'll be underway just after 4 o'clock, just waiting for a few people to join, and then we'll get underway with Kevin and Fred just after 4. Coming up tomorrow, 2 o'clock, Clara Parkinson from Audience View and myself. I finally get to produce or present a webinar. Let's be brackets even more like airlines. That's at 2 o'clock. What lessons can we learn from the airline industry? 3 o'clock on the 3rd of June, that's Wednesday, no benefits, no problem. Karen and Tom taking a view on how we keep customer service issues down to a minimum and how we deal with not being able to give members and pass holders the benefits they've paid for whilst we're currently shut down. So those two coming up this week, but we'll be underway in about a minute or so with Kevin and Frederic. Hi, good afternoon, folks. It's just after 4 o'clock here, UK time, so we're going to get underway with this webinar this afternoon, second of the day actually. Will patrons still travel for events with Kevin and Frederic from Stay22? Important to say, Stay22 or Fred was actually supposed to speak at TPC 20 back in March, which unfortunately we had to postpone till 21 for obvious COVID reasons. And it's interesting that we've been using Stay22 ourselves at TPC as our accommodation provider for a number of years now. It's the actually only accommodation provider we've actually ever made any money from. So it's great to have the guys here. That's me at the top, Andrew Thomas, Director of Ticketing Professionals Conference, and Fred and Kevin. We'll be about 30 to 45 minutes today. Try and keep them light on a Monday. We are recording and we will make the session available later on demand on YouTube and on the website. So if you have to rush away, you can pick it up later on. The guys have got a presentation with some interesting stats in, maybe a bit of discussion and then a Q&A. And if you haven't used Zoom webinar before, Q&A you'll find at the top or the bottom of your screen in the toolbar. Hit that Q&A button. You can actually give a thumbs up to questions that you see and like, which you're pushing up the list, and comment if you've got an opinion or input on that question as well. So you can do that in the Q&A box. But before we start, we thought we'd have a little bit of a poll to just see where people were thinking, because the guys have got some stats. So if I find the right button and hit relaunch, you should be able to see a poll. There's 5 questions about how much do you agree with the following ideas about patrons. Are they still looking to travel for events? Agree, neutral, disagree. Whether you think event travel will become more local than before. Again, agree, neutral, and disagree. And whether you think hotels or rentals become more or less. So I'm not seeing anyone voting. Fred, can you see that? Can you see that poll on your screen?
Yeah, I can, absolutely.
Oh, they're coming in. They're coming in now. The votes. So I was terrified. The votes are coming in now. Oh, I thought I pressed the wrong buttons. It's terrible in tech. So they're coming in now. If you haven't voted, last chance to have a couple of votes on what you think. Agree, neutral, disagree with those 5 things about patrons going forward. We'll just leave a couple of seconds more. And I'll just read them out because for the sake of the recording, people don't see this on the recording. So I'll read them out once we close this out now. And I'll do that. That's closed out. And I'll share the results so you can see them if you're actually on the webinar live. The question, patrons are still looking to travel for events. pretty even. 38% said neutral or disagree. Only 25% agree that patrons still looking to travel for events. Events will become more local than before. 81% of you said that. Hotels will be more popular than rentals or Airbnb. 38% said agree and neutral. 25% disagree. People more likely to drive and fly. 63%, as opposed to 19% in neutral and disagree. And then finally, people like to stay in town for longer than before for events. About 25% agree, 25% neutral, and 50% disagree. So interesting, some stats there. We'll include those in the mail out to you. But over to you, Fred and Kevin.
All right, so I'm going to take over the screen from our friend here and go straight to our presentation. All right. So good afternoon, everybody. We're actually based in Montreal, Canada, Kevin and I, so still the morning for us. So if you have a hard time with our Canadian accent, well, just put your question in the comments and we will try to have our best British accent for you guys. So will patrons, travel for events? It's a good question, very relevant question for us. This is our solution, our mission. If they don't, we have problems. So probably you're not familiar who we are, right? We're still a startup. We started about 4 years ago and we had exponential growth over 300 to 400% year over year up until this year. I can guarantee we're not going to have a 400% growth this year with COVID being an event travel solution. As I'm sure you guys are very familiar, not much events happening and not much travel happening. So not much business for us on the short term. So, who we are is really, if I sum it up, I won't review the whole mission statement, but it's really to provide event goers, the best and fastest travel solution. So they can make the best and fastest travel choices, essentially. So we collaborate in all parts of the decision funnel, if you like, for the event goer, from the discovery platforms, which you see there, to the actual ticketing on the ticketing, which is obviously your reality. It's mainly on the confirmation pages where we place our interactive map to be able to service your patron after he purchased a ticket. Also in the confirmation email, just everything that post-purchase after the flow. We don't want to disrupt your ticket sale flow, but rather after, to be able to provide them tools, right, to go to your venue. Obviously, we work directly with events. We put a number there. So this is where we're collecting our data, right? Why we wanted to share some of the data is because we have a little bit of a 360 macro vision on event travel. Over 18 million users on our maps on a monthly basis makes for a whole lot of data. And to be honest, thanks to Kevin, now we're only starting to scratch and understand that mountain of data and try to make sense of it all. So if you're asking yourself, how do we collect this data? Where does it come from? How do we compile it? Well, you have an idea here as to where it comes from. Obviously, I'm not going to go into any individual stats of our partners for privacy reasons. Everything is an aggregate of all different segments altogether. So, just how we work very briefly so you understand we're an iframe, right? So we plug in, you see Ben's in town here. We literally plug into a page. It's an iframe, so it's not a complicated API integration. And we aggregate hotels, Airbnbs, parking spots, restaurants, so forth on the map, right? For the sake of this, I'm going to show you some quick live examples so you can see, right? Stereo Board, which is a event discovery platform, a UK-based one, right? And Random Event, I took Genesis, I'm sorry, at Newcastle upon Tyne at that arena. So blah, blah, they sell links to different tickets, quite the expensive show, by the way. And boom, our map lives here, right? So you can auto-generate it with the dates, filters, the thing, you can filter all sorts of things here. And you have the distance to the venue, the rates, and etc. Oh, well, let me make it a 2-night stay instead. And boom, all the rates will, adjust accordingly. Maybe, I don't know, I hate Airbnbs for some reason. I just want to see hotels. No problem. You will only see hotels, blah, blah, blah. All the filters that you are used to. So without further ado, let's jump into a bit more of the heart of this conversation, which is, will patrons travel, right? So for us to look at the stats, we set up a few hypotheses moving forward, right? One of them that we care about is, hey, yes, patrons are still looking to travel for events. Another one is event travel is going to be more local than ever before, right? So it's very classical statements that we see on the market. And I mean, rightfully so with the travel restrictions. I think they have no choice right now, should there be any events, which there's not, but they couldn't go international anyways. Hotels will be more popular than rentals / Airbnb. People will drive to the venue more than ever because of just either A, the proximity of the venue, meaning that it's a local event, local travel, or simply because, hey, I don't want to take the plane, too much people on the plane, too much people on the train. Driving could be, you know, a isolation type of transportation, if you'd like. And one of them, it would be that, hey, if they're driving from afar or for a few hours, you know, they're going to make it a longer stay in town because, well, driving is longer than flying at an equal distance. No rocket science here. So before we address any more data, right, I just want to jump into the main one, and that, you know, are patrons interested in traveling for events right now? I'd love to say yes. The reality is, nope, not at all. So this is, you know, this graph, I mean, and don't take a look at the early of the graph, you know, that John Forward just set up this software earlier in the year. So previously the stats just didn't appear, but it gives you a number of interactions we had on our map. An interaction is somebody playing with a distance, somebody playing with a filter, hovering over a pin. So anytime he's playing with a map, that for us, it equals like window shopping, if you'd like. So he has some interest in travel after purchasing a ticket, for example, on the confirmation page after the ticket sale. So you see pre-COVID numbers, about 1 million, right? Near 1 million. Then you see the COVID drop. And you see, unfortunately, up until basically late last week, it has not really budged, right? One thing's for sure, though, this represents the now, right? So it doesn't represent the future. So the stats, the more meaningful stats, actually, before I go into that, an interesting thing, right, is that, you know, obviously we have a more 360 travel. We don't only work with events. That if ever you're curious where your patrons' disposable income instead of live entertainment is going now, right, it's definitely outdoor activities. I'm just sharing that for you to understand what's happening with your patron now and his money that usually goes to events, to your venue, and so forth, right? Obviously, that's not possible right now, no matter how good you do. The only travel websites and like live experiences websites really that are booming right now, to no surprise, are the outdoor activities. All Trails is a very popular one, Trail Links as well, and you see, you know, it going up in time as COVID hits. More and more people are looking for outdoor activities. So this is really where your patron will be going this summer. If ever you're asking yourself, what do he do with his spare time, his spare money, that disposable income, it's going there. On the right side, the right hand, you see Stereo Board, which was basically the live website that I showed you, right, a few moments ago, that really more represents the reality of the event and live entertainment space, right? So a nosedive, to no surprise. So it kind of, you know, one is getting replaced by the other. So all this reflects like the immediate now, right? But I don't think you needed my help or my stats or anything to be able to know that, you know, your patrons aren't aggressively looking for events right now. You knew that from the get-go, right? And that they were looking for the outdoor activities. Pretty self-explanatory. Maybe you weren't fully in tune as to how much this is spiking right now. But again, this is pretty self-evident. Our goal, and I'll pass the virtual mic to Kevin at this point. Kevin is our product owner and really the brains behind this presentation. Is to really gain insight as to, let's look past the immediate situation. Let's look past the evident current reality, right? And see maybe different behaviors of our users being your patrons, your event goers, and some interesting changes that we're seeing. And we're drafting, again, more hypotheses of how basically our interpretation of these changes in behavior. At this point, we got educated crystal balls, educated guesses, right? Our sample size has dropped in the past few months simply because less interactions, less people shopping for events. But nonetheless, right, it gives interesting insight on the future that I think are relevant for the marketplace to hear and to be ready should these insights become an actual reality. All right, with that, Kevin, I'll leave it at you to look at the stats.
Yes, all right, thanks, Fred. Good afternoon, morning, or evening, everyone, wherever you are right now in the world. Just before we get started, I wanted to go back to Fred's original point about our accent. I don't think there's a more Canadian thing than apologizing for your own accent. and in the same train of thoughts of apologizing, I also want to apologize for, not just apologize, but please beg your forgiveness for the, let's say, the crude presentation of the stats and the data you're about to see, and the graphs, more or less, that you're about to see, since they're pretty much hot off the press. So we just bundled them up and then throw them on some slides for you to see. So definitely it's not going to be your, there's not going to be 3D rendering of any of those statistics, but still very interesting information to be shared with you today. So without further ado, the first part I wanted to look at is see the difference in the user distance from the user location himself and to the venue location. Here, obviously, we're looking in kilometers. So the first part I wanted to look at and present to you was what was the difference within the short range itself and the medium range. So short range being obviously from 0 to 100 kilometers, and medium range from 0 to about 500 kilometers. The short and medium would not likely be that this kind of driving range, essentially. And as we can look at in the columns on the left, the total for both the pre-COVID and the post-COVID are pretty much similar. There's no like statistical significance in variation for either, especially in the medium range. In the short range, though, we see a little bit of it in the 0 to 25 kilometers, meaning there's definitely some people that are actually booking accommodation nearby themselves, essentially, which is, again, some would say surprising, because 0 to 25 is a pretty short range, pretty short radius. But in reality, possibly some of this would be the caused by, for example, first responders needing accommodations or anything that's obviously more COVID related in this case. That's could explain one of the reason why. So the other point I wanted to look at, however, is the long distance, which actually produced something different in terms of change. So as we can see, I've actually changed the brackets from essentially per 1,000 kilometers. To give you a rough idea, anytime you're above more or less 3,000 or 4,000 kilometers, you're usually on a transatlantic or intercontinental destination at this point. Obviously, with some exceptions whenever we're talking about Europe itself. But if we're talking, for example, North America to Asia, or North America towards the western tip of Europe, then yeah, we're talking about more in this 3,000, 4,000 range in distance. So what we see is there was definitely a surprising increase in the 4,000 kilometers and up, which would kind of go, if you want, against the trend of believing that, hey, it's all going to be local. So there is definitely a lot of international traveling happening right now in this post-COVID era. However, what's important to understand here is that the long distance itself is based on a somewhat smaller sample size, I would say. So what's important here is that we're not trying to tell you that, hey, the recovery of COVID is going to go through international traveling. That would be kind of reckless to put as a statement. But there is, however, an increased interest from travelers to definitely just get out of here. They just want to go somewhere else that's kind of far. They're still trying to plan for something exciting. Some people have been piling up money during those months and such. So they're just looking up to get away, essentially. I don't think that's going to represent the bulk of it, obviously, once the true traffic starts picking back up. But it's still an interesting trend to look at. A quick point I forgot. Yeah, please,
Yeah.
Fred, go ahead.
Sure. Would you? So that's definitely one of the stats that jumped to my eyes when I saw them. Is that like so? Would you say essentially like there's sort of some sort of high resilience from that hardcore event goer, hardcore patron that really makes a point to travel for events? He's still planning to go in 2021 to his big event overseas, and that's basically the whole COVID situation has not impacted his willingness to really travel long distance to go to events. Is that essentially one of the takeaways that you have?
Yeah, and actually, I think it even goes above resilience, whereas it's an actual increase. So it's not even people that are sticking to it. It's actually people, there's more people now looking to go even further if you want. So that's why, again, some of the causes could actually be like just the fact that obviously being stuck at home for so long is one thing, but again, either they have more income, as we just said at the beginning. Not everyone will actually start spending thousands of dollars on camping next door. So some people have kind of piled up some money and say, hey, now's a good time once regulations start softening up, or actually they're praying and hoping that regulations will start softening up by the time their trip comes around. And that's a point we'll actually cover a little bit later on in our conversation.
Interesting. So basically that, for these types of travelers, the limitation, like the breaks will not be their confidence to go to event or their willingness to go to event, but rather the actual ability to go to events and travel.
Yeah, exactly. That's 100%. You nailed it right on the head. And by the way, if you guys have questions, you can go, we'll pick questions on the fly. So don't hesitate to write them up in the box or chat box below. We'll pick them up along the way.
Yeah. All
Great.
right.
Yeah, moving along on the next one, we decided to look at also the accommodation types that the traveling patron are now currently looking for. So we obviously divided them by the two simplest, general categories, being hotels and rentals. And again, I would say not necessarily surprising, but interesting result. Whereas the hotels themselves went from representing 43% of the bookings to 62%, and rentals obviously dropped on the equivalent on that front, so by 33%. So this comeback by hotels is likely due to, first of all the aspect of cleanliness, regulations. So, if you're booking like a rental, usually you need to meet with the host, exchange keys, and then you're going to go into someone's house that you're not really sure how rigid those regulations were. Obviously, companies like Airbnb are currently putting a lot of effort into reassuring travelers that this is what they're enforcing, and more houses are being verified, if you want, for those regulations. But definitely, it's as I said, unsurprisingly, travelers will definitely tend to err on the side of caution and go with hotel chains, for example, or other kind of more hotel properties that are known to follow strict procedures and guidelines for such time that we're facing right now.
That stat really surprised me because obviously, yes, for sure. I mean, hotels will have a standardized process around sanitary measures that maybe Airbnb, because of its host supply nature, has a harder time to achieve. But my original thought, and I was wrong, obviously, is that, hey, an apartment allows you for much better isolation and much less human interactions than a hotel through elevator, lobby, corridors, and etc. Right? So I was a bit surprised by this. So I stand corrected.
Yeah, it's very true, and it's a very good point you're bringing up with the fact that there's less interaction. So my personal feel is that the rentals will definitely start picking back up where they were once it's proven that there's been a significant downtrend in contamination, essentially. So once we're kind of at ease and knowing that either a vaccine is out or people are there, there's definitely less of a concern about being essentially contracting COVID itself, the virus, then rentals will just pick back up to where they were and represent more than half of the bookings usually. So I guess right now, I think it's really obviously a temporary trend, but it does feel like people are preferring hotels for this kind of peace of mind, very likely. Quick point even on that is the cancellation policy. So with rentals, they tend to be a little bit more complicated. You never know for each listing if it's simple. With hotels, they tend to have, not all of them, but usually for the most part, they tend to have more simpler cancellation. Yeah, I will say policies where it's actually clearly stated. It's easy, and if you have free cancellation and it's clearly stated outright. Whereas rentals, because sometimes have a calendar of cancellation, you have to follow and make sure. So maybe that turned off some people essentially, and then
Yeah, there's definitely a bigger risk factor. And should your event not happen, should you not be able to travel for whatever reason, hotels, and you're right, you were generalizing, but usually have like a same day cancellation policy, meaning you can cancel same day without any charges. That's very rare for rentals. So uncertainty demands flexibility, and then hotels obviously offer so much more flexibility in terms of that.
Yeah, pretty much. Exactly.
Good point.
Exactly. Moving on to the next one is we're looking at what is called the booking window, which essentially is like a lead time in the hospitality industry. So we're just talking about the period of time in between when a reservation is made and when the actual arrival date of the guest at the property itself. So we wanted to look at are people going to book much further ahead? And again, interesting result, not necessarily surprising, but there's still some interesting and surprising facts that we can look at. So as you can already see, the biggest jump has happened through the hotels. So they essentially went from 2 months to about 5 months ahead of time. So it does show that right now, travelers are not looking to book in the next week, in the next month, and not even the next 2 months. At this point, they're really just planning ahead. Obviously, the key here is that most of them are taking advantage of the cancelable rates. So they just want to plan ahead, take kind of advantage of the hotels and usually the lower rates that's happening right now in the industry, and obviously cancel if needed when the time is right based on the cancellation policy. Actually, quick side note on that, if you ever tried that method, please do take great attention to the cancellation policy, because even right now in the COVID times, the flexibility for cancellation is pretty much gone. If you bought a prepaid non-cancelable rate, the hotels are very adamant right now in not accepting a refund now that it's known that they're not going to cover essentially those bookings if you decide to cancel them despite booking a prepaid booking, as it used to be. But there was kind of a flexible period back in March and early April for most hotels. But right now, obviously, there's still some good deals to be had, but definitely triple check your cancellation policies if you go that route. And the rentals obviously did saw an increase as well, but not as much, going from 2 to 3 months as far as rentals. So definitely the biggest important factor here was that hotels went up by 2.5 times essentially in their case. So that was really interesting. So that's why I'm saying not necessarily surprising in the sense that people definitely need to book ahead of time at this point, but otherwise they're now looking into more of a end of year approach. And keep in mind that this is the average booking window, so there's definitely chunks of people booking a year ahead or even 10 months ahead at this point for their trips, just to make sure to secure something in usually sometimes either expensive or difficult to obtain destinations.
So that's interesting. So basically, what we're seeing here is people are booking more hotels. They're booking way more in advance than ever, almost 3 times more in advance than previously. And you feel this is because, well, you know, if I'm going to plan ahead, let me plan ahead with the most flexible options, and that's the hotels. And this is why they seem to be capturing a bigger share of the bookings, and that the user feel more confident to book a hotel so much further. So much further in advance.
Yeah, and for one of the explanation for rentals not going as high as hotel is that this increase actually goes kind of in line with the fact that people are going to book like the outdoor we discussed earlier during this presentation. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of rentals that really aligns with that aspect of booking nearby if you want, and you don't necessarily need to be booking that far ahead if you're going into a chalet or this kind of property, which is what people are kind of running for, or will be running for in the upcoming month or so, now that the confinement will happen in more and more countries and regulations will be softened up a little bit. So this kind of aligns with people now are booking this, but I'm not surprised. Hotels I feel will definitely be booked more for I'm not going to say international travel because that would be too broad, but we'll definitely shoot for hotels in longer trip if you want, or further trip from the house.
Okay, perfect.
I also took the initiative to look at actually this booking window, but divided by region in this case here, where we have North America, Western Europe, and APAC. APAC mainly covering essentially Australia, Southeast Asia in this case. And again, so what we can see here is the biggest increase came from Western Europe. So this is the market that right now would want to book much further ahead. And one of the reasons that came to mind for that is in Western Europe, there's definitely a lot more neighboring countries, for example. So it's easier thus to travel in different countries and further away in that case. So they would want to book further ahead just for that reason, because they don't know if a certain country or that country that they have in mind will allow or tolerate international traveling, or how easy it's going to be to travel, as opposed to North America that is large in itself for either Canada or United States. Both of them, each respective country is already large in itself, but usually the regulations will drop within the country itself. So once it does, you can still travel pretty far, but with one set of rules, as opposed to Western Europe, where you have so many countries, or actually Europe in general, so many countries next to each other, but with different sets of regulations possibly. So that could be one of the explanation of that drastic change. One interesting note also is APAC actually seeing a decrease in lead time from their pre-COVID and post-COVID era. So Australia and New Zealand, and in this area not being as affected, it seems that there was not that much of a change in their habit, essentially in their booking habit, which was interesting to notice, which usually is not really the case in most other regions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is very surprising, actually. The minus 10%.
Mm-hmm, definitely. Moving on to the other one is the length of stay. So we wanted to see again the impact of a reservation for a traveler, if you would actually tend to stay longer or not in this post-COVID era in this case. Again, the highlights here comes from the rental segment, where there's been a 50% increase, more or less, in the rentals vertical. So people are definitely tending to stay longer, so an average of 4.9 nights for each state bookings, whereas hotels went from 1.6 to 2 itself. One of the reasons usually for rentals by default has always been longer than hotels for most of the time, mainly due because the lower nightly price, which again helps a lot when you're doing that, when you want to book on rentals. And on the second point, it goes back to what I was saying earlier, where people were stuck at home and want to go elsewhere. So there's this combo of lower nightly price and going outside the city essentially to other type, probably do some outdoor activities and booking a rental like chalet type of property, and then you're going to book it for a longer period, because at this point you just wanted to get out and enjoy this kind of break. So that kind of goes hand in hand and aligns with the previous stats that we've been, or actually statements that we've been uncovering over the past few slides.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So, okay. So, I mean, we had a few hypotheses, which obviously were submitted in a poll earlier. Though our patrons were still looking to travel for events. So, well, we clearly saw at the moment, I mean, we still have some patrons and we still see transactions happening, but at such a small scale compared to pre-COVID that the answer would be no, not at the moment, right? But again, let's keep in mind that, events are not being held, nor are they really marketed. So we're really looking at a behavior in a desert, if you'd like, and that doesn't tell the full story of the future. Another one, and one really surprised me, that event travel will become more local than before. So we saw that, in terms of short range and mid range, there was no major difference so far, at least not reflected by the actual user behavior, meaning that it's not going to be less local than before or more local. Currently, we're seeing pretty much the same thing. The other thing that changed was that very, very long distance, super resilient international event traveler, that he's actually extremely eager to be able to travel to your show. So contrary to what we thought as a standard, right? Our data does not suggest that event travel will be very, very local, at least not right now. Hotels will be more popular than rentals and Airbnb. Well, that's true, except for the overseas patron that has been reaching out basically more for the Airbnb bracket. Could be because of the length of the stay and the pricing of it. Could be also one thing that might skew our stats, and from full transparency, is that it might be that traveler has been submitted or is expected to be submitted to that quarantine 14 days. And that obviously that makes for a very long length of stay that might skew the numbers. We have no way to know that. Although it'd be surprising that he used our map on a ticketing website to book his quarantine, still very much possible that he did. Because of the data we saw on the distance of venues, right? We saw that more drive than fly. Well, so far, not really. Again, not to say we should be more fly than drive. It's just that the kind of status quo. Currently, every indicator is down, but kind of in equal proportion, meaning that there is no evident data that says, yes, short range is going to happen. They interacted more with the parking functions of our maps versus accommodations and that sort of thing. So that just isn't the case. This does make for a longer stay in town. That's probably the most evident one with the shift from hotels to Airbnbs, obviously, is that clearly the lengths, whoever's shopping right now on our maps, whoever's booking accommodations are looking like substantially for longer stays that they were in the past. Could it be that it's simply the people that were staying long-term anyways, they're just more resilient on the map? Or it's just the people are currently shopping on the map now want to stay longer because they expect their transportation to be longer? That could be it as well. But empirically speaking, it's pretty much black on white that they are looking for longer stays more than ever, which was also very surprising to us. That's essentially the biggest takeaways we have. Like I mentioned, we collect a whole lot of data. We're constantly scrapping to understand more what that data means. I also want to welcome everybody. If you have data-related questions, go for it. If we don't have the answer now, we'll dig in. We've done that with a lot of our partners to ask them, hey, what would be valuable for you in terms of data, and we'll mine it for you. We have a gold mine of data, and we haven't mined it properly. So if you want data gold, come ask us.
Guys, thank you. That was absolutely superb, fascinating. I was tweeting away during that one, which I found some really interesting stats there, especially looking at those length of stays. People who are on Q&A's open, head to the Q&A at the top or the bottom of your screen and get a question there if you've got a question for the guys. I've got one, which is I think I'm going to answer it myself, but if we're going to have lower attendances because of social distance seating or anything else, or an inclination not to go, how important do you think it is now venues are maximising every revenue opportunity to, I hate to say it, shake every dollar or pound or euro out of a visitor? How important is that going to be to us in our survival?
That's a great question, Kevin. I'll start with it. If you want to jump in, please do. Obviously,
yeah, for sure.
I think that is crucial. And before we even think about money for the venue or the ticketing, I think it's a question. It'll be a necessity for the event traveler himself, for the patron, right? I think it all starts from an understanding that, we talk about experience a lot in live entertainment, and rightfully so. I think it's more important than ever to realize that your venue's experience does not start at the moment your patron enters at your venue, and it doesn't stop the moment he leaves your venue. I think the experience aspect, like where he first interacts with you, whether it be an email you send, social media, whatever it is, the experience starts there, right? And the factor for him to come to your venue, buy a ticket, spend on F&B and so forth, the external variables are bigger than ever, meaning that you cannot rely on your content at the venue, like the live show, the sport team, like the live entertainment part of it is important. Obviously, it's crucial, but everything else prior and after is more important than ever. How does he get to the venue? What options are you offering him? How are you reassuring him that, you know, it's safe and it's sanitary and so forth? So I think it's a responsibility for anybody who is selling live experiences to understand those needs and cater to those needs. All those questions your patron's asking himself no matter what. And if he really wants to come, he'll do all that thought process himself no matter what. But it's kind of your choice. Do you want to encourage that, and do you want to monetize that, right? Will he be finding the right accommodation, looking if it's safe or not, and etc.? I mean, this is all things, opportunities for you as a venue, my opinion, obviously, that are revenue generating opportunities, right? Even the sanitary ones, right? If somebody's super sanitary freak, maybe you want to sell him a special package where, I know, he offer a branded mask at the venue. Maybe he is within one part of the venue, one section of the venue where maybe everybody got their temperature tested, you know, sort of, you know, upsell opportunities based on that. And the people who are traveling, they'll be traveling no matter what. It's kind of your choice if you want to monetize that, control that, cater that in a flexible way or not. So yes, I would, anything that's crucial in terms of variable for the patron to decide to come to the show or not, I'd like to be involved as a venue. And if I'm involved, I want to monetize.
Superb.
And if I can quickly add on to that, if you allow me, Andrew. One thing I want to add is actually something I've been saying over and over in other conferences I've attended and in panels I've spoken on. But right now, we have an incredible, obviously, as bad as it is, we have an incredible opportunity right now to take advantage of this kind of downtime to innovate. Innovation right now is a crucial driver, and the opportunity is right to take it and change whatever, either your system you're using. Again, monetization options are obviously on the table for such a crucial time. It's like asking for someone who'd like more money, and then why would you say no at this point, especially in those times? So of course, anything that you can monetize is a great idea, but innovating doesn't mean spending thousands of dollars into a new technology or a new system or program, whatever it is. I'm a big supporter and fan, obviously, of the startup community. This is maybe not your area of expertise or your network, but you definitely have people that you know that you can talk with and explore options with whatever you're doing right now. And you're curious to have something different, and doesn't have to be expensive. So my biggest suggestion and recommendation to all of you for now in those trying times would definitely be to first stay open-minded, and second, thrive on innovation at this point and use this downtime to make your organization essentially better, faster, more efficient, and obviously more productive, and that could generate more revenue in the end, which is the goal, more profitable. So that would be the quick 2 cents I would add on that.
I think it's a shame this webinar's not on Friday afternoon, actually, because it'd be a great way to wrap up this series, really, which is that takeaway that, you know, even if we're not going to open for a couple of months, this opportunity that we have now to change, to innovate, to explore new opportunities, to implement new things is obviously is a massive opportunity. Guys,
you can invite me back on Friday, no problem. I can do the same speech.
Well, I think we'll have drinks on Friday after get to the end of this 4-week webinar marathon. Anyway, guys, thank you for joining us early in the morning from Montreal. It's been fantastic having you on, and thank you very much for the effort of mining that data. That was absolutely superb. Coming up tomorrow, one of your fellow countrywomen, Cara Parkins from Audience View, will be joining me to talk about lessons we can learn from the airlines. We'll be talking about hotels and many other things as well. And then No Benefits, No Problem on Wednesday with Karen and Tom from Spectrix. Kevin, Fred, thank you very much for coming on today. Really great to have you. And I hope we can have a beer sometime soon.
Absolutely. Thank you, Andrew.
Absolutely.
Thanks, everybody, for tuning in.
Thanks, everyone.
And thank you all for joining us. And I hope to see you on a webinar or in person very soon indeed. Good afternoon.